To end the year on a high note, Dan Clark Audio has released a brand new closed-back headphone, the Noire X. Let's check it out.
Just shy of $1,000, the Dan Clark Audio Noire X headphones expand on the success of the iconic Aeon 2 Noire, improving the comfort, build, and sound quality for a reimagined mid-range headphone. What's new, you might ask? An improved driver with Dan Clark's AMTS technology that's been featured in the Stealth, Expanse, and E3 headphones, new ear pads that are backward compatible with the Aeon 2 series, and Gorilla Glass 3 clad cups, which originally debuted in the E3, just to name a few new things. So let's get into the sound, what everybody wants to know. Drew, what were your initial impressions?
So first things first, I was really surprised when these headphones came out. I didn't know they were coming out. Not that I have a direct line to Dan Clark or anything, but it was a real surprise. I mean, they did surprise us last year with the E3, and I think that was around the same time frame, Thanksgiving. This one's a little, it came out after Thanksgiving. I'm really excited. With each iteration, they're tuning better and better, and they're making improvements in each headphone. The headband is getting better and better as the headphones are getting lighter. The headband, which is a auto fit assembly, right? You don't have to adjust anything, it fits on your head, but based on the weight of the cups, it sits differently. So this one is really the most comfortable of all the Dan Clark so far. Not that the other ones are uncomfortable, but because of the weight, it perfectly sits on my head. Whereas the E3, when I first put it on, I've got to push it up a little bit, but that's just for my head size.
Yeah.
In terms of tonality, I love the E3. It's warmer than the Noire. It's got a little bigger presentation or 3D effect. But the Noire's got something really interesting that I didn't hear with the E3 when going back and forth between the two. There's some energy going on in the top end.
Yes.
And it's really engaging. Not that the E3s aren't engaging, mind you. I'm just trying to point out the subtle differences that I'm hearing. And it feels a little bit like when you've got a super tweeter in a room that energizes the room because it's bouncing and reflecting off of stuff, not in a bad way, but in a good way. It makes the sound livelier. And this has that certain livelier tonality to it without being bright or anything, right? It is a little more, like I said, not as warm as the E3, but it's not a bright headphone. It's got good tonality, very linear, very detailed, very easy to listen to. It's a little more efficient, so it's a little bit easier to drive. With each iteration of Dan Clark, the headphones are getting a little bit more and more easier to drive, which has been a problem in the past with portable players, mind you. Some portable players would distort at high volumes with like the original Aeon and some of the earlier models. But with each iteration, it's getting a little more efficient and easier to drive without giving up any kind of sound quality factors. I looked inside the driver cups to try and see any kind of variations in drivers, and the ear cup is a little bit, the ear pad, not cup, well, the cup too, is a little bit smaller than the E3, so my ears are medium. I didn't really feel it clicking on the sides, but I do want to note that the ear pad is a little bit smaller than the E3, so if you have large ears, that might be a concern, but super comfortable, non-fatiguing, listen to it for hours. I really enjoyed this headphone. And dare I say, and this is going to be a bold statement, one of the best headphones under $1,000 without a doubt. Absolutely fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
I do have to say, for the price point and kind of with what you get from Dan Clark Audio, this is an exceptionally priced product.
Yes.
The E3 was more expensive, so I feel like people who wanted the E3, but maybe the price of it is kind of what held you back, like this is a really good, affordable option. Going back to kind of what you said about the energy, I did notice that when I was listening to kind of like rock, be it like soft rock, kind of a little bit more like heavier metal stuff, I did feel like really good attack. Really nice energy to the sound. Overall, it was really dynamic sounding. I felt like it had a really good dynamic range to it. And it's kind of in line with what I've experienced from the Aeon line. Like their headphones, they're just really good for just like high energy, almost demanding genres. The kind of what I gravitate toward, like pop, rock, you know, dance kind of style music, things like that.
Yeah. And I will say that the Aeons, like the E3, are a little warmer than the Noire. So, you know, we're changing tonality here. You know, Dan Clark went to a Harman curve, which is a much more neutral, natural sounding tonality for the Stealth and the Expanse. And now we're starting to sort of move back, I think, towards some of the tonalities that I heard in the early days of Dan Clark. You know, the E3 became warmer than those models. The Noire is not as neutral, and honestly, I'm not a big fan of the Harman curve. I mean, I get the Harman curve and why it's so good, because it'll work well with a lot of different genres. It doesn't do anything incredibly well, in my opinion. You know, it just does a lot of things good. So no matter the music, like the Expanse and the Stealth, which are fantastic headphones, are good for all types of music. But I find that other headphones may excel better in certain genres, but then they're not as great in other genres, right? So it's all a trade-off. But I think now we're sort of moving, and I haven't seen all of the measurements yet of the frequency curves on this headphone, but I think we're moving a little bit away from the Harman curve, because this was a lot more engaging and exciting. And so that's what I love: detail, resolution, and engaging sound. I'm not a real big fan of neutral natural. It's a little kind of boring for me, but I am a detail freak. So, but at the same time, I love warm headphones like the E3. So, you know, I love that headphone too. So the biggest takeaway for me is the E3 is warmer. The old Aeons are a little bit warmer. The E3 has a little bit bigger three-dimensional sound presentation, but you get this energy with the Noire, so I don't miss that big, you know, open feeling to the sound, if you will. Like, I think in the E3 video when we did it, I said this is the most open sounding closed back headphone on the market at the time,
and I agree.
right?
Since it's the holiday seasons, I've been enjoying some Christmas music on these headphones, and I felt, you know, lots of imaging, great presentation with that specific kind of subgenre, if you will. But with these, I just felt like I was getting a little bit more of like an immersive kind of intimate listening experience. Something that I would kind of associate a little bit more with the closed back headphone.
Yeah, I felt like I was hanging out with the band with the Noire, where I was watching the band with the E3 is sort of it. But I wasn't in the middle of the stage where they were surrounding me, but I felt it was more of a personal space with them. That's a perfect way to present it. You know, let's get back to easier to drive. So I used it with a bunch of Asnell and Kern players that I knew were problematic in the past for some of the Dan Clark headphones that are more difficult to drive. No problem. I've got the SP3000M here. Drove it wonderfully. A great combination. I still had some extra headroom, but you know, for the people that want to rock out, I think there's still enough gain, especially with that model, to do that. So that's a big deal. Cables, you know, with the E3, I definitely ended up going with the Silver Dragon. On the Noire, I felt like I could go any direction, depending on the type of music or the system that I was using with it. So really, all of them, the black, the blue, the silver, are all great choices for this headphone. Just figure out which, you know, what do you want? You want more detail and resolution, and you're using maybe tubes, you go with the Silver Dragon. You don't want to add any coloration, and you want to get closer maybe to the more neutral, natural tonality of Dan Clark headphones, you go with the Blue Dragon. If you want some meat and potatoes at the bottom end, you know, you're going to go with the Black Dragon. It'll add a little warmth and smooth out the top end and give you just a big presentation. So, you know, great pairings with every piece of equipment I used. I also used some Matrix Audio, the X2 all-in-one headphone amp DAC. I used it with the Hedonia. I realized the Hedonia is a ridiculously expensive tube amplifier, but you know, you have to get an idea of what it sounds like all across the board in terms of presentation. And it was fantastic with all of them. I mean, the Hedonia, whew, man, talk about the energy, was just insane. So, but this is gonna make for a great portable headphone. It's easier to drive now. That was the whole point of the Aeon line, was to get a smaller form factor, a more portable headphone. This one's easier to drive. This is gonna be a great portable headphone and great for taking to the office. You know, you're not going to get incredible isolation on the subway or airlines, but still, it folds up. So, you know, one thing that's great is they all fold up so small into this little pouch, if you will, container that you can carry it around with. So yeah, a fantastic headphone. Well done, Dan Clark.
Okay, so I did have a couple questions for you, but we hit on most of them. But there is one question that I do want to ask. So as everybody knows, the Noire X was modeled, we'll say aesthetically and sonically, a little after the Aeon 2 Noire. So my question is, if you already have the Aeon 2 Noire, is it still worth upgrading to the Noire X?
For me personally, hands down, yes. Sell your Aeon, get the Noire. You know, there have been a lot of advancements at Dan Clark over the years. I'd say we're, you know, several steps beyond where the Aeon was at its time. But now with this, you know, we're several iterations in of lots of different technology from Dan Clark. So to me, this is a pretty big step up. It's not night and day, but it's definitely a better model. You know, the build quality with each iteration on all the Dan Clarks is just getting better and better. And they're able now to add more expensive materials, but not jump the price of the headphones so incredibly. Like I would have thought, you know, Gorilla Glass on a $1,000 headphone would be too expensive. But you know, I think they've got the numbers now where they can keep the price down and still do some more of the exotic materials that can help probably with the tuning. I have never asked the question about how the Gorilla Glass helps with tuning, but I imagine based on its rigidity, it's got to help with resonance. So I would definitely sell off the Aeon, or I mean, you know, I like to have lots of different headphones that have different tonalities. There's no reason you have to sell it off, but if you need the money to get the new Noire, definitely worth upgrading. Definitely worth upgrading. So that'll wrap it up on the Noire X. You can score a new Dan Clark Noire X headphone and shop the entire collection of DCA products by heading to moon-audio.com. Keep up to date with the new product release by subscribing to our channel, and don't forget to hit that bell so you don't miss a single video.
Thanks so much for watching.
We'll see you next time.